to start our first office hours of 2026. Welcome, everybody. We've got a good amount of folks who've joined us, and I know that number will just grow the further we get along this morning. You know, you got to wake up and remember what's happening around you. Got to get that caffeine flowing through those veins before we get things going real good. So we welcome you all. If this is your first time to office hours, essentially, this is a virtual plant clinic, and we ask that you guys send us your pictures of home, garden, vegetable, and ornamental landscape questions and pictures through the submission portal. You can do that at any time. You don't have to wait until, the week before office hours. If you go home and you have something you're wondering about right now, or, think of something later today, just hop outside, take a picture of it, submit it on the portal, and then we'll have an opportunity to highlight some of those cool questions. And maybe it's not a question for you. Maybe you know exactly what's going on, but you would like to share that with other people. Those are situations where we would love for you to submit those as well. So, like I said again, welcome. We've got a great. I'm sorry, my phone keeps ringing. We've got a great gathering of panelists here to answer questions and have some discussions today. Um, for those who are new, we kind of split the session up into fruit and veggie, and then we hop on over to ornamentals that includes like woody landscape plants, your grass, your turf questions. So we'll kind of progress through things that way today. And if you have something that's on your mind, feel free to type it into the question and answer box, and we'll have some of our folks in the background who can help with answering those. Okay? All right, so I didn't introduce myself. If you're new, you may not know. My name is Celeste Scott. I'm the Horticulture Extension Specialist with UT Extension, and I'm stationed over here in the Western region in Jackson. And yeah, so let's get started. And I think let's start with fruit and veggie. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay. So I might hop around back and forth, fruit, veggie, but I'm just kind of taking these as they were entered into our question portal. So this is a great question for us to start off with because it can have lots of different applications. It's about raised beds. I feel like that's the newest, biggest, one of the biggest trends in home gardening is everybody wants to use raised beds. It feels more accessible. Sometimes if they're maintained properly, less weed control, things like that. But here's our question. This comes to us from Shelby County, so a Western Region submission. Thanks, y'all. I'm constructing raised beds that are in contact with dirt. I think soil, native soil. We'll say soil, right? My lawn person wanted to use limestone in between the beds for a walkway, like crushed limestone, I'm assuming. I was reading that it can affect the pH of the soil and wanted to know what your recommendations are in advance. And I think they submitted a picture along with this. Well, it is a picture, but it's just a picture of like gravel, right?
Of crushed limestone.
Yeah. So what do we think? What do we think, panelists, friends?
Well,
Um,
I'd be happy to jump on that first thing in terms of talking about, yes, all lime is crushed limestone rock. Gravel, if you wanted to think about it as lime, except it's just in a form that it would take thousands of years to degrade to where it would impact the soil. However, the dust off lime and gravel roads, I've seen it affect blueberry fields where it's raised the pH to a point where blueberries did poorly. However, in the setting that you're talking about, whether it would be a gravel pathway or limestone rock, it's going to have little impact on that raised bed. And literally, when we lime a yard, a garden, and we're trying to raise the pH to impact positively the nutrient uptake of plants and those nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, whatever it might be, that's macro, micro nutrients in the soil, that liming agent has to come in contact with the soil particles. And so, in short, that lime would have to be mixed in with the soil to really have much impact, or if it was laid on the top, it'd have to work its way down into the soil to impact the soil pH. And what you're talking about there, I don't think there's going to be enough to have any positive impacts whatsoever or any altercation to the soil pH.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And I'll throw in a human note, which is I kind of like crushed limestone because if you try to pick some of the more aesthetic options, river rock, pea gravel, y'all are probably smart enough that you've never tried to make a walkway out of pea gravel, but it is the most annoying thing in the world. So probably why they are suggesting crushed limestone is for very useful human reasons. It packs, you can run a wheelbarrow over it, like it's a pretty good surface. You can get it deep
Good.
enough. You don't have a lot of trouble with weeds. So,
Yeah, pea gravel. I feel like a little duck, kind of like waddling over it every time. I'm like, how am I going to get through here?
It's like walking in the sand at the beach.
That's right.
yes,
That's
yeah.
right. All right, great question to kick us off this morning. So let's move on down to our next that I feel like falls into our fruit and veggie category, and that is going to be okay. Here we go. I like this one, and it's a challenging question, and it's a question everybody has. One of our community gardens has had major infestations of squash bugs in the last several years as the adults overwinter in the soil. Could we skip growing summer squash for a year or two to reduce the squash bug populations? What are we thinking? Getting a little bit of rotation, or not really rotation, but just kind of, you know.
Yeah, so the joys of squash bugs. We don't have Seth on here. So like we're just gonna have to we're gonna have to wing this. Oh, we do have one other person who's experienced the joys of pea gravel. I'm glad it's not just me that goes for aesthetics and then realizes the functional problems. Okay, so back to squash bugs. They are yes, they overwinter in plant debris and things like that, even like around structures and such. And literally, when I saw this question, the first thought was, well, we're gonna have to figure out, how far do they travel? And so the information that I found suggests that the squash bugs do in fact fly. So it is unlikely that a big rotation is going to be enough of an asset probably to offset the loss of your summer squash. I think that in an area where there's a lot of gardens, chances are there would be enough population nearby that they'd probably be able to come and get you. So I think that rotation is always good. So rotation for many other reasons can be beneficial. So if you've been growing in the same area, you would receive benefit for other reasons. But I would probably be more inclined to think back to our really addressing that young nymph stage, right? We're not going to get impact on eggs. Those adults are quite resilient to whatever, most of what we're going to be spraying on them. So I'm thinking about the stage at which to really target, with a spray that would be able to impact them. Anybody else, you have other great squash bug suggestions?
No, I would tell you exactly timing, and targeting eggs and or the juvenile rather than the adults. And one last thing on if you're using pesticides, whether it be squash bugs or Colorado potato beetles or whatever, if you read on those labels, they will tell you a max number of times of application of pesticides during the season to reduce resistance to any pesticides that we might be using in that garden. So just happen to have the thought that, really read those labels, adhere to however many times that if it tells you to apply it a max of 7 times per growing season, adhere to those. And timing of let's address the egg stage or the larval stages of those rather than waiting until insects are full grown adults and we're trying to control them with a neem oil or something like that that's going to be 100% ineffective.
And I wanted to share this real quick for those. The picture that I showed earlier was of an adult squash bug. Thank you, question submitter, for including that picture. But we've talked a lot about how it's important to target control on these different life stages. So, yes, being able to recognize that what we're looking at here is the adult squash bug. But this is what our squash bug eggs look like. They're kind of like coppery, they're clustered, usually kind of wedged into those vein crevices. They don't really like to just put them right out in the open on the tip of a leaf. So if you're checking leaves, you really got to get up underneath there. And then as far as their immature stages go, they look different as they develop, right? As they molt. So the youngest ones are going to be more limey green bodies with black legs, so they blend in, except for the leg part, to the leaf. And then as they get larger, their bodies lighten to this white, so that makes them a little easier to see until they finally reach their mature adult physical look. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with y'all so everybody could be able to identify that. Okay. Okay, so here's another one. Also that last question came to us from Knox County. So thank you for a question submitter for that. So here's another fruit and veggie focused question coming from Marshall County. It says, "Hi, I planted some of my garden plants, including fruits and vegetables and flowers and herbs, right? A few early, and then I packed straw all around them when we had dips in temperature. I guess that was very early, right? So they were trying to use that as a little bit of insulation. I left the straw there, and now eventually pushing back from some of the stems to stop them from rotting. Still, to my horror, I'm fairly sure this has helped fungus and other pests proliferate and spread throughout the planting area, especially in regards to tomato plants and zucchini, and now some of the herbs. I've started getting rid of it, and of course, trying to prune and minimize damage. Could you talk about using straw as mulch and the risks and benefits, and then confirm that this was my mistake in this case?" And the picture, it says, "This image is not my tomato plant, but a great example." And that they were going to be prepared to submit a picture with their question the next time. So I feel like that's a multifaceted question. Number one, I also use wheat straw as mulch in my vegetable gardens and even in my ornamental plantings quite often. And it definitely is going to be super helpful for reducing weed pressures if you can get it thick enough, right? Wheat straw is light and fluffy. So if it's not packed and you're just putting a light sprinkling, you're not going to have a lot of benefit from that wheat straw in the weed control area. But I like to put it really dense, really thick, and it's wonderful for weed control. I don't nestle it right up to the, like, around the stems of the plants, because I do feel like you may have some airflow issues. It may even prevent water from getting down into that root zone, if you have it really thick and really mounded up around the base of the plant. However, I don't see it contributing to foliar diseases in any way. Do Greg or Natalie or anybody else, any other panelists with us, want to speak to that?
I mean, I guess what I was thinking when I heard that question was maybe the distinction between around and on. So, we use sometimes straw for our dormant strawberries to provide some winter protection. And I was wondering as I was reading that question whether these had been young plants that had been nestled in a bit more and we had, more plant contact with that straw. And yes, with moisture, that can definitely trap. Oftentimes those would be, really just like plant organic material breakdown types of organisms. They may or may not actually be, true plant pathogenic, but if it's moisture, and close contact, they could break that down. So part of what I agree with everything that Celeste said. The other thing that I was thinking was I might make a suggestion that for early season temperature protection, I would use a row cover or something like that that can provide some insulative capacity, but also does not weigh heavy on the plant, does not retain moisture close to young plants, provides a little bit of airspace, So I'm thinking there might be, there are some better ways to protect those young plants from temperature.
No, and I'd agree with that too. Timing, when did you put those plants in? And if I see this little plant and basically it's covered up to the leaves, or right up to the leaves, and the leaves are nestled down in that straw, I can see disease pressures maybe popping up then. But if you've got a plant that's up above it, the leaf canopy's up above the straw, uh, I don't see that. I see far more benefits from using straw than not.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. Great. I hope that answers your question, coming to us from Marshall County. Let's see. Oh, our next one from Rutherford County. I love that we have such a spread out pattern of question submissions, right? We're covering the whole state. So from Rutherford County, it says, I have what I assume are wild blackberries on one of my fields. And I would say they're probably right. If you didn't plant them there and they're teeny tiny, then they're probably wild blackberries. I was at the Spring Hill event. That was Fruits of the Backyard. Oh, that was last week, right?
It was Tuesday. That was this week.
Tuesday. Oh my goodness. It was just a few days ago. Let's see, on Tuesday. And Dr. Lockwood made it sound like they are bad and that I should not plant any other blackberry plants within 300 feet of those wild blackberry plants. Our question asker was not able to talk with him to ask why. And so they're just looking for some guidance. So what do we want to let our question asker from Rutherford County know about these wild blackberries?
A lot of these blackberries, especially, maybe not as much as what once was, but still, there is a potential from those wild rubus to transmit viral diseases into our domesticated blackberries. And so some of those original cultivars, and Natalie, you could probably correct me on these, but the Apaches, the Navajos, some of those early cultivars developed through the University of Arkansas program, they were very susceptible to viral diseases that came out of those wild blackberry crops. And so we just basically tell people, as a rule of thumb and from a sanitation standpoint, and reduce the potential for diseases coming out of those wild, unmanaged blackberries, keep them as far away from your your domesticated blackberries as much as you can, just to reduce disease pressure. And while I mentioned viral, there's other, rust and different things. There's lots of things that can come out of those wild blackberries that could spread into your tame blackberries. So from a cultural management standpoint, reducing disease pressures, that's why we make that suggestion to get them as far away from your blackberry crop as possible.
Yeah. One or the other. We enjoy one or the other, domesticated or wild, both taste great. And there are also some weeds that can also be vector, like host for some of these viruses are vectored by insects. So it's a process of insects feeding on one and then feeding on the other. Celeste has given us some great examples here. There's a lot of research being done in blackberry viruses. Many times they're complexes of different viruses. So the science is cool, but the practice is straightforward. We're keeping them apart to prevent disease moving back and forth.
Awesome. And our blackberries are coming in nicely. That's over here in West Tennessee. I don't know if everyone else's are ripening up and getting going.
I've been getting pictures from around the state.
Okay,
yes.
good.
So last one thing on those pictures there, as you can see, viral diseases can look a lot of times like nutritional problems and vice versa. And also one thing that I've heard probably more this year than maybe I have in the last 5 or 10 years combined is phytotoxicities of people that were either using a fungicide or some bacterial sprays or something around trying to treat one problem, an insect disease, and getting phytotoxicity, which just a fancy term for saying the leaves are bleaching out. It looks like I've burned them up pretty bad. Almost like I've sprayed them with a chemical, which you have. And so just be careful to read and follow the label on whatever it is that you're using. And it's not a good idea to say, hey, if a little bit works, a lot would do a much better job. you can set yourself up for some big problems and take a pesticide that might do a great job in controlling an insect or fungal disease or something and create more problems just because you overdid it.
Yeah.
Yeah. One other additional piece of context about the virus, just in case this wasn't clear, the reason why we're so proactive about preventing viral spread is because once we get it, there's no treatment. And so this is a perennial plant. We would hope to get 8, 10, 12 years worth of productivity out of this plant. And if it goes down with a virus, it's over.
Yes, excellent. Okay, moving right along. This question comes to us from Robertson County. It says, what is the best, in all caps, solution for flea beetles on my eggplants? And I want to try to share the image that they shared with us. If I can get it to work. Y'all be thinking about your what we want to share with our friends about flea beetle control. Now, they're not specific to eggplants. Flea beetles can feed on many of your other vegetable garden plants as well, but they are one of the first kind of like indicator plants. They're like a favorite food, right? Like I love pizza. Flea beetles love eggplants. So, if you're seeing this kind of like lacy feeding pattern here on your eggplants, you are probably almost definitely dealing with flea beetles. Looks like they need a little nitrogen here too.
No, none of us are excited to jump in on the best question because I shouldn't speak for everybody because I find that intimidating, right? It just makes me want to provide caveats. I think flea beetles, similar to squash bugs, cucumber beetles are one of my personal nemesis. These are challenging pests to control. And oftentimes we want to work, from some of our lower impact materials. And yes, if we did a lot of insecticidal soap or neem oil, we could reduce that population. My tendency might be to, this might be a spot where you'd want to consider an early season, application of one of our more conventional insecticides for knockdown efficacy. Or you could just use your eggplants as a trap crop. So, there's a lot of things that are listed, and most likely this is going to be a multiple spray to control type of scenario. We don't have great predators or parasitoids. These are rapidly moving, leaf feeding insects. I know Bob was smiling. Taylor, anybody else? Do you have any good suggestions you want to toss in?
The best thing we ever found, because we had them really bad in Alabama, was exclusion. Was
Yeah.
that was the best thing we found was exclusion, but the problem with that is then nothing can get in. So they ended up almost being like a trap crop. That's why I laughed, because they were almost like a trap crop, but exclusion was the most effective approach we had.
Yeah. I grew some beautiful greenhouse eggplants back in the day.
And this question kind of bleeds into another one that feels like they're kind of connected because this next question focuses primarily on just like pesticides in general, right? And like which are the ones they should be using? What things should they be staying away from? This comes to us from Sumner County. So they're saying over time, their experience with gardening, they've been using products like pyrethrins, think bifenthrin, permethrin, things like that fall into that category. Neem oils, neem oil, which actually carries an OMRI label. So if you're looking for organic focus type products, neem oil would fall into that category. So would like horticultural oils, insecticidal soaps, other products they've been using, Sevin, uh, which used to be carbaryl, but no, it's different now. They've changed the active ingredient for the Sevin products that are available to homeowners, and it controls a wider range of insect pests. And then finally, they listed diatomaceous earth. So essentially, they were saying, they've been trying to do more research to find out, which products they should be using in a preventative manner versus reactionary, right? When you see something, then decide what your best plan of attack should be, so to speak. And they were just wanting to know like what our thoughts were on which of these were good and which of these are bad. And I'm going to say I don't think that's the way that we should approach that question. I think it's got to be specific to insect and host plant recurrence, the threshold of the feeding, right? So I mean, eggplants, if they're kind of big, they can take a lot of flea beetle damage and they'll be okay, right? You saw how much leaf tissue was still remaining on that plant. So lots of different things go in to play there. And also you've got to think about, what is your priority as far as, just like environmental stewardship goes, right? Are you heavily focused on natural things that are, we'll think like biological control products like BT? Are we leaning more towards organics, or are you open to using the more modern chemistries, the synthetic pesticides, which are completely fine, but we've got to follow the label, right? Um, and so I'm gonna say I don't think there's an easy one answer for that. And then I wanted to share with you all this publication, and I went to post it in the chat, and then I saw somebody else had already put it up there for everybody to see. But if you have not used or referenced this publication yet, I really want to encourage you to check it out. This is Conventional and Organic Product Overview for Home Vegetable Gardeners in Tennessee. And it talks about all these things, right? And it lets us know which products are organic. It tells us, kind of a quick reference rundown of what types of pests these products target. And my favorite part is on the far left-hand side, it tells us what the active ingredient is and then gives us some examples in the very next column of trade name products that you can go out and look for. That's not a, all-inclusive list of trade names, but it's definitely going to get you on the right track. Do we want to share? Oh, was I not sharing the screen that whole time? I thought I was showing y'all the publication, but I guess you can see it now. But this is it here, and then there's what our chart's looking like. So anything else, panelists, that we want to add to our friend who's asking about best types of insecticides to use?
No, I mean, I think that was a great foundation. The other thing that I would toss in is the mode of action element, right? So if you're using a horticultural oil, you're essentially suffocating that insect, right? A very physical contact, right? So many of these, whether it be a pyrethrin, the natural version, or a synthetic pyrethroid, those are impacting the nerve signaling pathways within the insect. While we may have some other materials like azadirachtin and neem oil that can impact the maturation, there's actually some growth regulator impact. So what we want to do is think about what is the type of insect that we have, right? Aphids, those soft bodies insects are going to be more appropriately targeted with some of those, suffocation types of softer materials. We have already twice, talked about some of those hard-bodied bugs and beetles that are challenging sometimes to get, with some of those materials. So we always want to think about what is this material actually doing? Is there residual, how specific is it for the insect? And this would be a fun, we should like do a teaching module on this sometime, some of those modes of action types of things. But great question.
Awesome. Okay, so I've got one more question that kind of falls into our fruit and veggie category, and the question is very straightforward. It says, "What is wrong with my peach tree?" And then they attach just a photo, so we don't have a lot of background information there. And I think that we're going to be able to pretty easily come to a determination on this question. But for future reference and for others who are submitting questions, provide us a little background information. Like, tell us if the plant is newly established, like newly planted. Is it well established? When did you first start seeing symptoms? Things like that. So the more information you can provide to us, the easier it is for us to get down to possibly having a diagnosis or a jumping off point anyway for you to dive into. So fruit and veggie friends, what do we think about this lower trunk damage here?
Peach borer, very common.
Instantaneous.
Yeah, peach borer. And
And
any damage, a lot of times we can see this in some of our landscape. Cherry laurel and others can be very problematic, and any of that boring that you see and damage at the bottom, that's all peach borer, which is a very common pest problem in peach trees. And like I say, can be very problematic. Lee could probably spend a month of Sundays just talking on ornamental shrubs and stuff that this pest can attack as well.
I think we have a couple questions on that, so we might address that here in our next section. But I just want to point out that this damage wasn't like that recent. You can tell they've already got some callousing there on the edges. So, I mean, this may have been happening over a number of years, and the plant has just gotten to the point where it can't tolerate anymore. And so now it's showing some visual signs, possibly up in the canopy, which led the person to go out and check on that tree. And then they say, "Oh my goodness, look at the base of the trunk here." So that's usually the progression of how things go.
One thing I'd say, keep your trimmers away, your weed trimmers and such, away from your peach trees. Don't ever get them into your blueberry crops, apple trees. Keep them bare soil or mulch, depending upon what the plant species is. But keep those implements of destruction for weed control away from your trees and shrubs.
Awesome. Okay. That wraps up our fruit and veggie section.